Hello students and welcome back to another anatomy video. In this video we will talk about the cervical vertebra, and after that we will look at the differences between the different animal species we know. So let's get started. And now let's start by talking about a typical cervical vertebra. And here we have the cervical vertebra number 4 of the horse. The cervical vertebra has body. This is the body, is long, the horse here. This is the body. We have here the vertebral arch. This is the vertebral arch. We will talk about it later. And as you can see, we have a lot of processes. Let's start with the body. The body, as we say, located ventrally and has two extremities. This is the cranial extremity, while this is the caudal extremity of the body. So the cranial extremity is convex, while the caudal extremity is more concave, because this is the place actually of the cranial extremity of the next cervical vertebra. So the cranial extremity of the cervical vertebra number 5 in this case articulates with the caudal extremity of the cervical vertebra number 4 here, like this. Okay, good. Let's go back to this one here. On the ventral surface of the body here, we have what's called the ventral crest. So we have what's called the ventral crest here. If we move to the arch consists of what's called the pedicles, two pedicles, left and right, and the dorsal plate. So the dorsal plate plus the pedicles, left and right, plus the body ventrally, they form together what's called the vertebral foramen. The vertebral foramen is the place where we have the spinal cord, and if we put all the vertebrae all together, so this vertebral foramen will form finally what's called the vertebral canal. The vertebral canal. Good. On the cranial surface of the vertebral arch here in this area, we can see like this opening here. It's the vertebral notch. And here, as we are next to the cranial extremity, we will name this one here as a cranial vertebral notch, because there is another notch here found in this area. This is the caudal vertebral notch. So cranial vertebral notch. And here we have the caudal vertebral notch. If we put the two cervical vertebrae together like this, so this is the cervical vertebra number 5, in the lateral view, as you can see here, just like this, you will find that the caudal vertebral notch of this vertebra with the cranial vertebral notch of the next vertebra, they will form this foramen. This big foramen, this is the intervertebral foramen. The intervertebral foramen from the name, because this is a foramen located between the vertebrae. Intervertebral foramen is the exit place of the spinal, or in this case, the cervical spinal nerves from the spinal cord. So the intervertebral foramen is formed by the caudal notch and the cranial notch, caudal vertebral notch and cranial vertebral notch. They form together this foramen, and the same between the other cervical vertebrae. Okay, and now let's move and talk about the processes, or these projections, where we can see everywhere here. So dorsally from the arch here in this area, we have the spinous process. So there's just one spinous process which is not developed here in the horse, while here on the side cranially, because we have this cranial extremity, the convex extremity of the body. So this is cranial articular processes. This is the cranial articular processes. Caudally, here we have the caudal articular processes. So this is the cranial articular processes, while this one here and this one here is the caudal articular processes. So from the name, their function is for the articulation with the adjacent vertebra. So the caudal articular processes of C4 in this case articulate with the cranial articular surfaces of C5, as you can see here. And that's why we can notice here that the cranial articular processes, they have their articular surface on the process facing up, as you can see here, while the articular surface of the caudal articular processes, they are facing down for the articulation with the next articular processes, like this. Okay, good. So we say this is the spinous process in the middle. We have articular processes, cranial and caudal. And if we move to the side here, we have the transverse process. So we have two transverse processes, one on the right side and one on the left side. So this is the other one here. And here in the horse, it's very clear that the transverse process is divided into two parts. In some books, they say that this is the ventral part and this is the dorsal part. Or in some other books, they name these two parts, or because they look like a tubercle or projection, this is the ventral tubercle and this is the caudal or dorsal tubercle of the transverse process. So the transverse process is somehow divided into two parts, ventral and dorsal. Inside, let's go to the caudal view. This is the caudal view of the cervical vertebrae number 4. And here at the root of the transverse process, so this is the transverse process and this is the other transverse process. At the root of the transverse process, here we can see this foramen here. This is the transverse foramen. So we have, of course, left and right transverse foramen. If we put all cervical vertebrae together, this foramen, they will form together, or of all cervical vertebrae, they will form what's called a transverse canal. Inside this transverse canal, you can find in live animals 3 structures. They have the same name. One artery, one nerve, and one vein. They have the same name as we said before. They are the vertebral artery, the vertebral vein, and the vertebral nerve. And this is very important because such, foramens, that are transverse foramen, are found just in the cervical vertebra. So we cannot find these foramens in the thoracic or lumbar or coccygeal vertebrae, just in the cervical. So that means if you find this foramen, that means you have a cervical vertebra in your hand. So we talked about the different parts of the cervical vertebra of the horse, and now we will talk about the comparative anatomy between different animal species. As you can see here, we have the camel, here we have horse, here we have the four cervical vertebra of the ox, here we have sheep, dog, and cat. And let's go and start with the camel. Comparing to what we described before, we can see that the spinous process of C4 in the camel is more developed than that one of the horse. If we move to the ventral surface, so we can see that the body of the body in the camel is more longer than that one of the horse. And look at the ventral crest. So the ventral crest is somehow absent in the camel, is very sharp and developed in the horse, as you can see here. What else? Yes, let's move to the side, and here you can see that the transverse process, this is the transverse process of the horse, this is the transverse process of the camel. So the ventral tubercle or ventral part of the transverse process is more developed in the camel, while this is the caudal, or sorry, the dorsal tubercle or dorsal part of the transverse process, so is less developed than that one of the horse. Let's move the horse to the side, just put it here perhaps, and look at that one of the ox. In the ox, the body is shorter than that one of the camel and the horse. So short body, the transverse process is more distinguished and has two parts. This is the ventral, the ventrotubercle, and this is the dorsal tubercle, or ventral and dorsal part, as we described before. Here in the dorsal view, let's put them all in the dorsal view one more time. This is that one of the horse again. Look at the spinous process of the horse and look of the spinous process of the ox. So the spinous process of the ox is very developed comparing to that one of the horse and the camel. So this is it's finger shaped somehow, the spinous process. Okay, what else? If we move to the ventral surface, as we said before, the ventral crest is absent in the camel, is clear and developed in the ox, like that one of the horse. And what about the transverse process? So if we look at the caudal view of the cervical vertebra of the horse and the camel, look exactly here, we can see that, as we described before, in the root of the transverse process here and there, here we have the transverse process, the transverse foramen. Let's put something inside. This is the transverse foramen. Transverse foramen located at the root of the transverse process of the horse. Look at that one of the camel. So here at the root of the transverse process, we cannot see the transverse foramen. Why? While in the cranial view we can see the transverse foramen here and there. Yeah, can you see it? So this is the transverse foramen. So the opening into the transverse foramen is located inside. I hope it's clear. I will put this one here inside the foramen. So it's located inside the vertebral canal. It's located inside the vertebral canal. Yeah, so that means the vertebral artery, vertebral vein, and vertebral nerve moves a little bit freely inside the vertebral canal, and after that moves inside the transverse canal. Here cranially, of course, we can see the cranial opening of the transverse canal, this one here. Okay, the transverse foramen, it's in the ox, it's like that one of the horse, located at the base of the transverse process, the transverse foramen. Yeah, this is the cervical vertebra number 3, and this is number 4, like equals to this here. So this is the number 4 of the sheep. The same way we can find the transverse foramen at the base of the transverse process. Yeah, the spinous process is more developed here also, like that one of the ox is more developed comparing to the horse, for example. So it's clear in the sheep. It's also very clear in the dog. Here we can see the transverse foramen at the base of the transverse process of the dog. This is here the transverse foramen. Let's move like this. So transverse foramen on each side, and the same for the cat. Now I would like to show you the cervical vertebrae of the sheep, just to tell you again that the first cervical vertebra called the atlas, the second is the axis, and from cervical vertebra number 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they have similar shape. The first, the atlas and the axis, they have their own specific shape, and that's why we describe them in details. C3 to C7, they have similar shape with some differences. Like for example, we said that the transverse process is divided, as you can see, into ventral and dorsal part. Ventral and dorsal part. Look at the C6 here. C6 has its own shape where the ventral part forms like a plate, ventral plate, and after that we will talk about the differences between the animals. All cervical vertebrae have what's called the transverse process. The transverse process located there, transverse process here and there, here, but not the C7. Not the C7. So I will show you the C7 separately to show you that there's no transverse foramen of C7, and there are some differences also between the animals. I will show you that separately now. And now let's look at this cervical vertebra. So it looks like a topical cervical vertebra. It doesn't look like the atlas or the axis, so that means this is one of the cervical vertebrae number 3 to 7. Here we have the spinous process. Let me first tell you that this is the cervical vertebrae number 6 in the ox. We have the spinous process is more developed than the other in front of this. The transverse process, if you compare this transverse process here with that one we learned of other cervical vertebrae, you will find that this is the dorsal part of the transverse process, and this is the ventral part of the transverse process, which forms like a very big blade called the ventral plate. From the other side we have another ventral plate, as you can see here. It's not the cervical vertebra number 7 because we still be able to see the transverse foramens left and right at the base of the transverse process. Let's compare this one here with that one of the camel, for example. In the camel again, here the cervical vertebra number 6 has also, or the ventral part of it forms also like a blade, ventral blade. Well, this is a small dorsal part of the transverse process. As I told you before, in the camel, normally you cannot find the transverse foramen at the base of the transverse process. But if you look into the canal, I hope it's clear, there you can find the transverse foramen left and right. If you push something here, you will end up there. So this is the external opening of the transverse canal inside this vertebra, and the internal opening is located inside the vertebral canal, and this is specific for the camel. Okay, let's move and talk about the 6 cervical vertebrae of the horse. This one here, if we go directly here, we have a small spinous process. Like other vertebrae, we have the cranial articular processes, the caudal articular processes, cranial and caudal extremity. And if we go directly to the lateral view here, we have the transverse process. It's not like that one of other cervical vertebrae. So this is the dorsal part and this is the ventral part. If we compare this one with that one of the ox, look, in the ox the ventral part forms really like a ventral blade completely here. It's not like the horse. If we look at the 6 cervical vertebrae of the dog, here, for example, the spinous process is more developed in this vertebra. This one here, the spinous process. We can find the transverse foramens, as you can see, left and right at the base of the transverse process. The transverse process forms something similar to what we saw in the ox, the ventral plate, left and right, exactly the same for the cat. And now let's move and talk about the Cervical vertebrae number 7. This is a caudal view of the 7th vertebra, number 7 in the horse. As I told you before, number C7 doesn't have a transverse foramen, as you can see here and there, so there's no transverse foramen. There's another indication to identify if we have the C7 or other cervical vertebra. Look at the caudal extremity of the body. You can see left and right here two articular surfaces, fovea costalis. This is for the articulation with the head of the first rib. So you can find such articular surface just in the C7, 7th cervical vertebra, left and right for the articulation with the head of the first rib. Otherwise, the C7 looks exactly like other cervical vertebra. It's the body, yeah. We can say that the body is a little bit shorter than the other, cervical vertebra. Let's move directly to the camel. In the camel, here again we can see this two articular surfaces, the fovea costalis for the articulation with the head of the first rib. So you can find it just in C7, no transverse foramens, even though I had some cases where you can find in the camel where you can find one or both transverse foramen. So and in some cases that if there's just one transverse foramen, I found it also sometimes on the right side and sometimes on the left side, and as you can see in this example, there is no transverse foramen of this vertebra. Otherwise, we have the spinous process here, we have the cranial articular processes, the caudal articular processes, and the transverse process is here. So C7, these two articular surfaces for the first rib and no transverse foramen. Let's look at the ox. In the ox, yeah, it's clear that the body of the C7 is shorter than the body of other cervical vertebrae, and as you can see here, so suddenly the spinous process is very developed, very high here comparing to the previous or to the other cervical vertebrae. C6, as we described, has the ventral plate. There is no ventral plate of the C7. Again, let's look for these two features we talked about before, the two surfaces here and there for the articulation with the head of the first rib are present. That means this is C7, and there are no transverse foramina or foramens on each side of the arch, so it's the C7 but of the ox. And now let's move to the dog. C7 in the dog doesn't have the transverse foramens. Also here we can see the two surfaces for the articulation with the first rib. The transverse processes are still caudoventral directed. The spinous process start from here to be developed and high comparing to other cervical vertebrae, and the same for the cat. No transverse foramens, very high spinous process and articular surfaces. It's not that clear here, but here on the side we have articular surface for the articulation with the first rib.